Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Kabir Shahani joins me today on the What Fuels You podcast. Kabir was recently recognized by Goldman Sachs as one of the 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs. He was the co-founder and CEO of Appature, a platform in healthcare for marketing automation, which grew to a multi-million-dollar business and sold in 2013. Now Kabir is busy building another successful business, Amperity, which has raised $37 million in funding so far. He's a husband, a father, and an overall just awesome guy. Welcome, Kabir.
Thanks, Shauna.
I'm so psyched. We're both laughing because it really is like we're on the radio together.
Totally. And it feels weird to hear you say husband and father because it makes me feel really old. But I love both those things.
And I also love that we're joking that we both are on these programs and we need beers here instead of our coffee. But I like how you took it black because you're on your Whole30.
Whole30, last day.
So what does that mean? No
Dude,
no
it's
dairy?
crazy. No booze, no added sugar, no dairy, no grains, no legumes.
Do you feel great?
Yeah.
Yeah, you walked up and I was like, dude, you're skinny.
Really? Great.
But you were not heavy before.
I wasn't trying to. I just wanted to be healthy. And I'm going to try to adopt some of the good habits I learned.
Tonight. Okay, so we're going to start with rapid fire.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Ready?
Yes.
Okay, Huskies or Seahawks?
Huskies and Seahawks.
Oh, geez.
What do you mean, or Seahawks?
Quality you seek out in a co-founder.
Thoughtful, balancing, calm,
yeah,
smart, technical.
That's a lot of qualities. I like it. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Extrovert.
What's your favorite app?
Instagram. God, that's annoying and embarrassing. But.
What's your go-to workout?
Oh, Peloton all the way.
You love your Peloton.
Oh, my Lord. Addicted.
Skiing or snowboarding?
Skiing.
Okay, nice. Wow, you're fast. I like it. Okay, so Kabir, you and I are like two of the last standing. You grew up here, right?
I did mostly. So I grew up in Kansas City until
nice.
8th grade.
Like Dorothy. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yes, until 8th grade. So my family moved here when I was in 8th grade.
And what brought you to Seattle?
My dad just got a job offer from a company he really wanted to join. So I didn't really have a lot of options, and it was super hard.
And what did he do? What did your dad do?
He worked in pharmaceutical marketing, which was a seed from our last company. So that was kind of where that gene came from.
Well, we'll get to that. I didn't realize that. And so do you have siblings?
I don't.
You're an only child?
The lonely existence of an only child.
And where'd you get your extroversion from? Who'd you play with?
My neighbors and good family friends, and I think I did okay making friends.
Yeah.
I was lucky that I had a lot of people when I moved here that were very warm. And
yeah, so you moved here in 8th grade?
Yes.
That's a tough year to move.
It was a tough year
You
to
were
move.
the new kid, and so what would those kids say about you?
Oh my gosh. And it's funny you say that because one of the first person who ever walked up to me in orchestra class, of all things, and said, "Hi, I'm Mike. You're new. We should be friends," or whatever he said. Actually, just texted me like literally this morning.
Oh, what instrument did you play?
Played the violin
for a long time. Do you still play?
That's a complicated question. I started when I was 4 years old, and like many things in my life, I was very intense about it, and I kind of burned out by the time I got to college. So I was playing competitively as early as middle school. I had some incredible experiences, like got to travel the world playing violin in
I didn't
6th
realize
grade,
that about
7th
you.
grade. Yeah, it was
That's
super cool.
That is
Did
awesome.
you know you could letter in orchestra?
I did not know that. But I have talked about this. Like, I burnt out also. I kind of peaked young. I played competitive tennis.
Oh, no way.
And peaked young. Mm-hmm. It's like you can really overdo something and be like,
right.
like kind of like hang it up. Did you hang up the violin?
Well, kind of. So I tried to play for fun when I got to college, and it quickly became like, oh, you should major in music, and like we want to give you a scholarship, and which was really flattering. But I also was not interested in pursuing it as a career, and so it kind of took the fun out of doing it joyfully.
Yeah.
And so I haven't played. The last time I really played, so my wife and I started dating right after we graduated from college.
You went to UW, right?
I went to UW.
And you met her there?
I did, senior year. And she had never heard me play the violin the entire time we were dating, engaged. And so I brushed up and I took lessons and I surprised her at our wedding reception and played. And that's the last time I played.
That is so
I haven't really
awesome.
It was really cool. I feel really happy about it. But I really want to. And now that we have 2 little kids, like I think I want to pick it back up and try to teach them. And,
it's incredible.
Yeah. And I think just music's such an important part of life. Like it's this incredible art. And especially for children, I think it develops parts of your brain.
So tell me more about your parents, because I know that you've spoken about them. I've read about things that you said. How did they shape you?
Yeah. My parents, it's in many ways the classic immigrant story. And so I watched them both work very, very hard. My dad came to America in 1978 from India. And he's not a technical guy. He wasn't a engineer, but a very, very smart guy, and more in the sort of economics and language and speech, and just he's just a very high capacity person, but didn't have that clear, hey, I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor, or I'm in computer science, or any of those kinds of things. Exactly. And built a really great career in marketing. But I watched him at many times work 2 jobs. My mom worked the entire time I was growing up. I think by the time I was in middle school, my family had sort of developed to the point where my mom didn't necessarily need to work for them to pay the bills. But that wasn't really in her DNA. So she tried that for about a year, and that didn't go very well. So
I'm not a stay-at-home mom type.
Right, right. So it was interesting in those really formative years where you see, and even at times I remember both of my parents working 2 jobs. And I know that sounds...
So who took care of you when you came home?
My
or
grandmother.
You were at music?
No, my grandmother.
Oh.
So my dad's mom, who still feel very close to her. She passed away in 2012, but still feel very, very close to her. She was, another mom, right?
Yeah.
So she was there every day and lived with us.
I love that.
And
Did you guys ever do that? I love that a lot of immigrant families, and I've always said to David, one of our 2 moms might live with us.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Yeah, it's super cool. I don't know, independent of whether or not we would do it, I don't think my mom would do it, or my wife's mom would do it. I think,
or your wife,
right? Or my wife. I think it's interesting because now my parents have lived in America longer than they lived in India, so their customs, their culture. There's obviously a ton of sort of the Indian mentality and culture and mindset that they each have, but there's also a lot of American or a lot
of Western. Was Noreen's parents, is she first generation?
She is. So Noreen's family is 3rd generation from East Africa. And you probably know there's a huge Indian population in East Africa. So she was born there, and then they immigrated here when she was like 2 years old. So, we both kind of saw that struggle. And in particular for me, in Kansas City, it was a time where, I don't want to say it was as overtly racist as the South, but, it certainly wasn't comfortable.
Did you get bullied?
I don't think I didn't feel...
I can't picture you because I just feel like you're so relatable to everyone, but I understand from friends if you look different or feel different.
Yeah, I definitely, I'm sure I got made fun of. I remember sort of like, neighbors laughing at the food and like things like that would never happen in the Pacific Northwest, by the way. And frankly, I don't think it happens in Kansas City anymore. And so I remember experiences like that. And then I remember some actually very painful, overtly racist situations, like coming home in, I think it was 3rd grade, and somebody had like spray painted a swastika on the front of our house, and like a nice neighborhood. No, it was pretty fucked up.
Yeah, that's so unacceptable.
Yeah, like in a pretty nice neighborhood, right? It wasn't like, we were in a very rural area.
By the way, I don't think overtly racism is like happening maybe to people like you and me, but it's on the rise. It's a really scary time right now.
And it's why I think there's been this emotional reaction by many of us to the Trump presidency, is because of what it's bringing out, and having lived through some other, I can give you, half a dozen of those types of stories. And, I was, the impressions to me looking back on it, one, obviously is how painful that experience was. 2, I have to give, my dad a ton of credit, because they sort of didn't skip a beat, right? Like the next morning there was somebody power washing the front of the house and getting things cleaned up, and it's always like it's just something that happened, and there wasn't like a big brouhaha.
No
about
victimizing.
it.
About
Right.
it. Yeah.
Right. Which I think builds a ton of grit and a ton of tenacity in how you deal with adversity.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So you ended up going to high school here, and then you stayed here and went to UW.
Yeah, which was this extraordinary experience because you went for, I'll never forget the contrast. You go from a place where you're sort of embarrassed to be different. It doesn't feel normal to be different. And then you move to a place where it's like exciting and cool. And I remember my parents laughing because they were like, oh my gosh, you never wanted to like eat the food or listen to the music, and now it's all you want to do. Well, it's because you go to school and everybody's really interested and fascinated. And to the point where, I went to Issaquah High School, and in that school district we do Tolo, which is kind of like Sadie Hawkins, right? And all the girls in our group wanted to go in Indian garb. And my mom's like brain exploded. She was like, this is crazy. Like all these American white girls want to wear Indian clothes.
Well, it's beautiful.
Right. She was thrilled by it. Right.
Yeah,
but that would never have happened, kind of
Did
earlier
they do
in my
it?
life. Oh, yeah. It was awesome. It was super fun.
Yeah.
It was super fun.
It's beautiful.
And so it's been fascinating to watch. I was chatting, somebody you should have on the show is Sunny Gupta, right, who just is in the process of selling Aptio to Vista for $2 billion. And, we were having dinner the other night, and he said, oh yeah, Indians aren't considered diverse anymore when it comes to board seats. So like you don't get to check the diversity box. And I'm part of me was like, well, that's
you
kind
need
of
to get Indian women.
That would probably work. It was kind of funny. He was like, yeah, like we don't fit the mold as diversity. And part of me was like, oh, that kind of stinks. Part of me was like, that's really great.
It's
like,
really great.
So there's been this amazing evolution.
It's really, really great. And so you studied informatics. Like, what is that?
So
as somebody who is like a sociology major.
Yeah, well, as a sociology major, hopefully you can relate to it. It's where computer science meets human-computer interaction.
Okay.
And so what I loved about that program, and I actually transferred back to the UW to be able to go in that program. So I originally left Seattle and went to school in Washington, D.C. for 2 years at American University because a whole bunch of reasons. And I thought I wanted to do pre-med, and I loved politics, and it was sort of the best blend of that at that school. And it was close to Johns Hopkins, and there was all these things. But I realized the nerd in me wasn't going to ever go away, and I really wanted to stay close to technology. And this program spoke to me because I didn't feel like I had the skill or patience or brain to be a computer scientist, but I was really fascinated with building systems and architecting systems and building technology. And the informatics program to me is so extraordinary because it lets you go fairly deep technically, not as deep as computer science,
right,
but you go all the way through operating systems.
It's almost like being an econ major versus like microfinance.
That's a great analogy.
It's just like the macro view.
Right.
It's really cool.
Right.
And so did you have any teachers that kind of had a big influence on you there?
Yeah, there were a couple. My first computer science professor ended up being the guy who started Google Seattle, Brian Brashad. And he was, the most patient man on the planet because I was in his office hours every week trying to get help with, different concepts in computer science. And he was just very generous about it. And that was super influential. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we had a professor in the information school who at the time, was infuriating. And over the years, and now I'm involved enough with the school that I've had a chance to talk to him about how powerful and positive his impact was, which was Professor David McDonald, who had a class called Computer Networks. And it was a very challenging technical class because you weren't necessarily writing code to build a software application. You were writing code to build network level applications. And so we were doing things like write an instant messaging client. Right, this is 2003, so this was before. You have to kind of think about the technology available to you at the time, and so it's like use C to write an instant messaging client, and that was like one example of 1 week's assignment, and you'd go and beat your head in over the wall, and then you'd go to his office hours and you'd say, Dr. McDonald, I can't figure this thing out, I can't figure that thing out, and he had the exact same answer every time you sat in his office, which was put on your figure it out hat. And we were like, we're asking you because you're the person that we're supposed to get the answer from. And he's like, put on your figure out hat. And I am so grateful that he pushed us. And I think we were in the cohort system. So I think everybody in our cohort feels the same way, which was it taught us a level of problem solving and self-sufficiency that I don't know that I would have got if it wasn't for that push. And it forced us to, leverage the internet in a way that I think at the time, there wasn't nearly as much content. I mean, there was a lot of content, but not as much as today. It really pushed us.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and so
great.
when you graduated, what I got from just kind of researching you is that you worked, Avanade was your first job, and then Blue Dot.
That's right.
And so in your summers in college, were you doing internships or were you kind of doing like what I did was like teach tennis or lifeguard or that type of job?
Yeah, so my summer stories start back in 6th grade. My parents made me go to community college in the summers.
In 6th grade?
Yes. From what I can piece together, there really isn't a concept of summer in India, like summer, like so my parents
were
like,
keep going.
Yeah, they're like, what the hell is this? Like, you're not in school for 3 months? Like, makes no sense. So,
well, especially because they were working. They're like, what are we going to do with you?
Right. So I ended up sitting in these college classes as in like auditing basically and not understanding a damn thing that was going on and just trying to keep up and tutors and all that. And so finally, by the time I think it was 9th grade summer rolled around, I'd worked up the gusto to go to my dad and say, look, I'm tired of sitting in community college classes. I'm not going to do it anymore. He goes, no problem. You don't have to do it. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, you just got to get a job. And handed me the classified ads. And so I ended up working summer jobs. My first summer job before Avanade, which was an internship I started with in college and then ended up going full-time after I graduated, was at a company in Auburn called Zones. It was an IT reseller. And so I worked in purchasing, I worked in tech support, and I did all this stuff over the summers, which was really fun.
I love your dad. Do you think you're going to parent your girls similarly?
Yeah.
It's a much different time.
Yeah.
And also you're raising them in a different class, it sounds like. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do want to provide the same level of kind of standard and expectation
like
around
teach them how to have that
performance.
That grit.
Yeah, for sure. Like push yourself, find out the outer bounds of your capability. Obviously, like everybody does, we think our kids have tremendous capacity and, we want to push them as hard as we can. But also give them, learning experiences and opportunities around that, which I feel like I had as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's
it's interesting though to take someone who's like, I mean, I'm meeting you at this stage of life. We've met, I don't even know, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And in my mind, I think of you as being this extroverted, very social, kind of moving around, go, 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 go. And I'm trying to picture you being pushed into these like community college situations and maybe thinking like, wait, my friends are over there.
Yeah. Oh, that was,
like, kind of having FOMO.
Yeah. I wasn't outside playing baseball, right?
Yeah.
But it also like, that wasn't an option for me, right? It wasn't like, oh, well, do you want to go to community college or do you want to go play baseball? It wasn't like...
Yeah, choose.
It was like, hey, this is the path that is important for you to go down. And again...
And did you ever push back or you just kind of accepted it?
Kicking and screaming. I mean, multiple times.
So Avanade, then you did Blue Dot. And from what I gathered, because those were like shorter stints from the recruiter's perspective, I saw your background and said, this is somebody who needs to be an entrepreneur and not maybe work for someone else.
Yeah. And, I feel less like I was pushed away than more I felt pulled. Right?
That's what I mean. Like you're the person who's like, hey, I actually think I want to do this, like for me.
Yeah. Like, and I have to give the guy I worked for at Avanade, my very first real sort of boss and my real first real full-time job, a ton of credit because I also am very singular focused. And so when I joined Avanade, my intention was I'm here to build my career. And it's a great company. And I'm going to spend the next 20 years and maybe one day I'll be a partner. And like that was the track I was on. And I hadn't really thought about a lot else. And when I was approached by the founders of Blue Dot to join the team early after they'd raised a seed round, I was super compelled by the product. I was super compelled by the idea of a startup. I was mostly compelled by the idea of having equity, which is something that's very important to me with everybody at our company now. And I feel this way, almost religiously, right? Where like people should have equity in the business. And that was always a sticking point for me because at Avanade, some people did, but I was not in that class where I had, equity in the company. And so when I was approached with the opportunity to join a startup, have equity in a problem space I thought was super interesting, a product I thought was super interesting, it was interesting enough that and this goes to show you how much I think I've changed a little bit. I in a deferential way went to my boss and said, look, these guys approached me about this. here's the situation. I'm not going to go if you tell me not to, but I'd love your thoughts on it. And God bless him. He said, look, I'd love for you to stay. Here's a bunch of incentives that I can offer you if you're willing to stay. But I can tell you as a friend, you should go try this.
That's so cool. It's almost like he took on the mentor hat instead of like, what's in it for me?
Well, and what was even crazier was he said, if it doesn't work, call me up and just come back to work the next day.
That is awesome.
I was like, dude, so I have no downside. So I
That's
like
incredible.
all the risk felt like it was removed, and I was able to pursue that. And obviously, that company did not achieve, what any of us involved were hoping for it.
So did you meet your co-founder of Appature
Yes.
at one of these companies?
I did at Blue Dot. So he was hired around the same time I was, and he took a senior engineering leadership role. And we, over the years, really, the couple of years we were there, really hit it off.
And so what was the idea behind the company? And did you bootstrap it? How did that beginning of a few days look?
Yeah, the quick version of that was we decided we wanted to go build a company together before we knew what we wanted to go do.
Cool.
Which was, I think the right thing for us at that age and that time. I was 24 when we started that company. There was a lot of altruism. There was a lot of like, hey, let's just go do something and figure it out. And so we were almost, we spent a lot of our time talking about culture and standards and what are the kinds of environments in which we'd want to work and where we'd be inspired to do our best work. And then how do we create that and then obviously find the right problem. And there were some benefits to doing it that way. I don't know that I can say, starting without the problem is something I'd recommend.
I love that though. I have talked to a few entrepreneurs who have done it that way, where they've just been like, I know we work well together and our skill sets complement one another. And I know that I want to build something.
Right.
A company where we'd want to work. Now we just need to go solve a problem.
Yeah.
So what was the problem that you were solving?
So that problem was, actually kind of not a different incarnation of almost what we do today, but the idea of, hey, it's at the time in 2007, multi-channel marketing was really challenging. So email marketing was becoming a thing, but text message was really new. And how do you kind of have email and text play well together, and surveys and sort of all these different places, as well as how do you use data to do that? And then how do you measure what's working? So there's sort of layers of the problem. And it was really more of like, we found an interesting problem to solve with somebody who was willing to help us, like, hey, if you guys solve this thing for me, I'll throw you a little bit of money. And so we did bootstrap it for 3 years, kind of in that model.
So you funded the business out of the business?
Yeah,
kind of thing?
out of revenue. Yeah. And so it was, but again, we're talking about a small N, right? I mean, I think when we raised our Series A, we were doing just a little over $1 million a year. Revenue.
And then you raised that from Madrona?
Madrona and Ignition.
And
That's
Ignition.
Right.
And how was that fundraising process? Did you talk
painful.
to a lot of people and ended up
Yes.
there? Or are those the first two?
Well, we did talk to a lot of people. To give them credit, and particularly Chris Howard, who now runs a firm in the Bay
Fuel.
Area. Yeah, Fuel. That's right.
I
yeah,
know Chris Howard.
Right.
Oh, I didn't realize he was involved.
So
okay,
he
cool.
really pushed us to come in and meet with the partners at Ignition, and then Ignition. It was 2009, so the market
timing was terrible.
Yeah, it was terrible, and so they wanted a syndicate partner, so they got Madrona engaged, and that's how I got to know Madrona. And so we did that Series A, and then the following 3 years is when we really sort of, I feel like, became a real company. Like we went from being like a really cool project with some buddies, and the company was 20, 25 people, bootstrapping it. We were sort of doing the best we could.
And where were you when you got acquired? How many employees, and where were you revenue-wise?
We were 63 people and kind of doing the 6 to 10 ramps. We were somewhere between 6 and 10 of revenue. And it was a, kind of one of those like, hey, we should think about doing this because it's a unique opportunity. And yes, we see a lot of upside on the business going forward, but there's also a lot of risk. And we had sort of 6 years of struggling through, where is your scalability? And so it was a tough decision because we were just starting to find some repeatability in the business.
And how do you get your team on board with that? Is that like you come in one day and make that announcement?
Yeah. We definitely spent a lot of time, getting guidance from, both our board and other people that we respect, and the management team, and had very candid conversations amongst, the early team that was there. And then you make the call and you do the best you can with the data you have, and then you roll it out, and you roll it out with all the pomp and circumstance that you might expect, but also the reality of like, here's the decision we made and why. And, fortunately, I think everybody was really happy.
Did you talk to more than one company or just IMS or like how?
Just IMS.
And how was their culture compared to your culture and how did that blend?
Yeah, really different. And I will say, I'm very candid about this. I learned as much in 2 years with them as I did in the 6 years operating as an independent company. Because, our CEO was a very seasoned leader and operator. There's a level of rigor and scale there that I had not experienced before. I got to ride, shotgun or, backseat
That's
for
an
our
MBA
IPO.
right there.
Yeah, it was incredible. So it just really selfishly, it helped me become, I believe, a much more diligent, rigorous operator.
And how are you different as an operator now versus then?
It's pretty significant in my mind. I'd be curious how other people would think about that. But I would say, one, much more focused on systems and process. And even that, I don't think I'm on the extreme end of that, but much more than I was before. Much more relentless about execution against our goals. I would say significantly more focused on making sure we understand the steps in the path that we need to take. There's a lot of hygiene that you need in a fast-growing business or a business at scale, and that hygiene just takes operational discipline that sometimes as an entrepreneur or as a founder isn't really the most fun stuff to do.
No.
But you got to do it.
Yeah.
If you want
or
that
surround
outcome,
yourself with other people who are forcing that.
That's right. And if you want that outcome, you got to be committed to doing that.
Yeah. And so tell me about Amperity. I love the way you've described your values, and I love the problem that you're solving. I wish that I could use Amperity because it's just larger companies that are your customers, right?
Yeah, I would say it's a spectrum, but mostly mid to later
But
stage.
who does this for our size companies? Like, everybody needs this.
Maybe one day we'll
or maybe I'll get to. Maybe that's my goal.
There
that
you
I get
go.
To be an Amperity customer.
Yes, I love that.
So Derek Sliger's your co-founder.
He is. He's a very good personal friend of mine, and Derek is somebody who was also, if you go all the way back to Blue Dot, he was an engineer at that company. He ended up being the first person we brought on board when we started Appature. He's our VP of engineering, and scaled. I mean, this is a man who has scaled with every challenge that's been presented. When we first started working together, individual contributor, engineer, maybe
Leader.
spoke 10 words a week, at least to me. And
maybe that's why you're good friends. You're like, just listen, no speaking.
No, on the contrary, I learned so much
I love that.
from him. And so over the years, we went from sort of two people working in the same office to, working a little more closely together to being very good personal friends. And our wives grew up together, which is a whole other story. It's been super fun. Our kids are 5 months apart.
Oh, that's a dream.
Yeah, it is a dream. And I'm so grateful for that partnership and that friendship.
And so you started it just in 2016, but it doesn't feel like that. It's talk about a real company.
Yeah. I mean, we've taken we've taken all of our dreams, all of our aspirations, all of our learning, and just, tripled down on it and gone all in. Like, all chips are in on this thing. Because we see such a massive opportunity to build a company that, is really everlasting, right? Like I was just sharing last week with our team, I would love to see us build a company that outlasts me.
Yeah.
And that sounds kind of nuts because that's not really something that a lot of people, I think, talk about, or at least, really have the space to think about. But when we look at the value that we're providing to our customers and what that value lets us do in terms of the universe that we build and the opportunity that we build inside of our company for the people that work at Amperity, it's really, really special.
I love that. And so I know that I read the values: play for each other, build for durability, make something better.
Yes.
So how do you look for qualities that exemplify that? What qualities would you say exemplify that?
Yeah, so there's a handful of things, and a couple of people who have been really influential here. So our head of people, Mary, who came from a decade at Amazon, who I don't think you've met.
Yes,
Mary,
I
right?
love her.
Okay, yeah. I think a lot of it is on, Mary, and you met Sammy and now Sasha on our team. Like, they've got really good instincts for that kind of stuff, and so we really lean on our people team and our recruiting team to assess for that. And then, we look for ways in which we can experientially validate it. So, for example, is this somebody who is very focused on, well, what role am I playing, and what exactly
what's in it for
me, which is really important. I think it'd be unfair for us to say that the career progression and the career trajectory for somebody is certainly a high priority, but you want people that want to be on the mission, right? First and foremost, it's like, I want to be on the mission. I want to be part of this. I want to grow something significant. And I understand I'm going to play different roles along the way, right?
And if they're too focused on themselves, then I don't think they would fit into the two of these. Play for each other and make something better, because otherwise they're just looking to kind of execute on something.
That's right.
Versus really think outside the box and be thinking, how is this impacting everything?
Right. And you're right. And that value, by the way, is make something better today.
Yeah, I love that.
The urgency of that is so important.
The word today is actually critical.
The word today is critical for me
because
it's
so
true. You have to be able, and this building companies yourself, you have to have a relentless focus on speed.
Yeah.
And that is your of all your unique advantages, speed is your biggest.
Yeah. What's a big differentiator too, because people are shocked when you're on it.
It turns out just doing what you say you're going to do is ridiculously underrated.
Especially in my industry. So I also noticed that you have 2 women on your leadership board.
Yes.
And on your leadership team, and a female board member.
Yes.
Which is incredible. Were you intentional about that, or is it just like, I hired smart people, they happen to be women?
It was certainly more, I hire smart people, they have to be women. I have to admit, I probably shouldn't say that, but that is my focus, is get the right people.
Yeah.
Now, I think having balance on the team is super important.
Yeah.
And having the right mix. And so, if you can, so for example, with Kelly, Kelly Wright, who's on our board, I think it was certainly opportunistic. We weren't necessarily looking for a new independent board member, but we thought, gosh,
she's a good one.
You're right. She's got super high horsepower, great experience relative to what we need. And the fact that she's a woman brings good diversity to the boardroom. So we like that. I think, with Amy Pelly, who's our CFO, or Mary Miller, who's running people, as we talked about, these are just the right people for the job, right? And we got fortunate that they bring, a good, diverse view on things that I think is really balancing. But if they were men, they would
hopefully do the same thing. Yeah.
Right.
So, what would you say? You said you want to build a company that lives beyond you. So that means for your children, your children's children, to be aware of the company and the impact that you're having. But what personal legacy do you hope to leave?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I think for me, it's certainly less about my children. I want my children to go develop and build their lives their own way. I don't have that same sort of like, I need to go, and I want to give them, whatever help I can, but I don't necessarily see them, being a part of this business or anything like that per se. I think for me, legacy really stands on, what we can do philanthropically with our time and resources to help our community and give people equal opportunities in education and the arts and healthcare. I think these are responsibilities that we have as business leaders, or if we get lucky enough to be in a position where we can be helpful to other people, then that's something we have to do. And so that to me is not optional.
I appreciate that. I just went to a talk on this. This is actually so relevant right now.
Yeah, I just think I've gotten super lucky a bunch of times. And I just don't get, it's just not even a conversation. It's like, if you get lucky, you got to pay it forward. And two, I think it's, can you create a system, right? Like so as an example at Amperity, we do 2 big services projects a year. And that's really important to me.
What are they?
So we do United Way Day of Caring, usually in the summer, I think it is, or end of summer. And then we pick a different one in the winter. So we do like every 6 months. And so the rotating one. So last year we did this crazy, which I think everybody should do this, which is a Union Gospel Mission.
Oh yeah, the search and rescue. Yeah, so I did that. I've done that the last 2 months.
It's awesome. So,
life altering.
Yeah, everybody should do it. Everybody should do it. And so that's one. And then we're doing this incredible thing this holiday season where there's actually, I didn't even know about this, but there's an organization to support orphans and foster children in Washington State that has this, and I've seen pictures, this like pretty amazing store where everything's free. And so they get to feel like they're going to a retail store and like have a shopping experience
Yes.
and get stuff. But
Are you talking
obviously,
about the treehouse?
I think that might be the name.
Yeah. So we do volunteer about once a month. We try to just go out, and all of these things are things that you get to do when it's your own company.
Right.
You're like, this is what I would do, and
Right.
now I want to share this with my team, and it's bonding, but it's giving back. It like hits every box.
Well, it's this standard I think we want to set
It's
around the
so
fact
good.
that, look, we have incredibly talented people at Amperity, and they're coming to work every day and creating tremendous value. And I believe that with that pace of value creation is a responsibility to go and do good in your community with your time and your resources. And so, the last thing that I can or should do is, force everybody to do it or say, this is what you got to go do. But what I do want to is say, hey, here's an environment where you're going to learn about these kinds of opportunities and you're going to be exposed to that. Because that's not something everybody has an opportunity to be exposed to. I certainly didn't, 20 years ago.
I think it's great that you're doing that. And so the final question for you, because this is the name of our podcast, is what fuels you?
Yeah.
What word? What fuels you?
I am really fueled by finding the outer bounds of your own capacity, right? Like I feel like life is this very rare gift, and we have this time on the planet to sort of unpack, everything that life can offer us and everything that we can find out about ourselves. And so I just want to, and I think about that in all dimensions. I think about it professionally. I think about that with my family. I think about it with my friendships. Like I just want to experience, all the things that life offers and live life and learn about myself through that process. Like I think I'm going to be learning about myself to the day I die.
Yeah.
And I'm just really fueled by learning about that through these different experiences. And I think company building, and you don't have to be a founder or a CEO to company build. I say this all the time. Company building to me is the highest velocity way to learn about yourself and people because of the rapid pace of change and the rapid pace of accomplishment. So it's something I feel so blessed to be able to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. This is fun.
Yes.
Thanks.
We
for
could go
being
for
on the
hours.
podcast. We really could. So when you're done with your whole 30 and you're ready to drink, we'll bring in some beers and we'll do it again.
We should do a version of that. We should do a cocktail version. I love it.
Sunny or your friend Sunny and whoever else you think.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, thank you
sounds
so
great.
much.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Shauna.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.